The primary inspiration for this video is 5 Stories from My Life and the Socialist Policies That Could Have Changed Them by Sarah Zedig. It's not necessarily the same concept, however, the general tone and subject matter and the way they work with each other to craft the narrative of this video is very much inspired by that one. I suggest you watch it, it's great. I've put the link down below. There's a great string of moments in 90s neoliberal fantasia as experienced by Daria Morgendorffer, Millennial, by Innuendo Studios, where he talks about the ways in which millennials tend to hold a grudge towards Gen Xers because they basically hoarded the last bit of real generational wealth that they could muster and left the following generation in the dust. And when talking about the sad, apathetic mindset Xers would have towards the world, he launches into this bitter dialogue about how could they complain about how things aren't as good as they used to be. For us, it will never be this good again. And then later subverts that framing by talking about what the video is actually about, which is that the world has always been kind of awful, and this system does not work, because it is a function of the system to keep you in a constant state of reminiscence for the world it is trying to convince you it can still create, so long as you maintain it, put the right people in charge, and take deep breaths. I've dubbed this section of that video, "Nostalgia is a set of blinders to a world that is burning behind you while you walk backwards towards warmth." Playing on your screen right now are a series of clips recorded by me during my adolescence, roughly around the years 2016 to 2017, when I was 17 and 18 respectively. They are clips from trips I had taken, projects that I never finished, and all of them from before I transitioned. I'm comfortable sharing these vulnerable pieces of myself because I don't feel connected to them anymore. The friends whose faces I will not be showing, I don't speak to anymore. The places I do not visit anymore. And the suburbs I do not live in anymore. To me, these are akin to found footage for a horror movie I forgot I was the subject of. It's strange watching these clips. I'm 25. If you're not aware, that's 5 years away from turning 30. I'm 25. And I'm having a real hard time reconciling with how I've made it here, my mid-20s. My brain has finished cooking, it's done. I'm finally responsible for my own actions. Isn't that cool? I'm 25, and there's nothing left behind me. I don't maintain any friendships with anyone I knew from primary or high school. My parents were working class and never really owned a home. So we moved around a lot, and every bedroom I've ever had is now some other kid's bedroom. Some of them maybe even as old as me now, and dependent on whether or not their parents bought that house, can still go back to those bedrooms and have a physical stimulus for many beloved childhood memories. I've never really had that. There are public spaces I can visit that can produce memories associated with those places. I can go to the steakhouse by the coast, where I spent some of my life, and remember the cloudy day my mom took me there for my birthday one year when I was 10. We had a seat by the wall where the window faced outwards towards the bottle store, and the bar on the opposite side of the street. I can remember all the times my primary school best friend and I would go there with 40 rand in our pockets after a night of smoking weed and playing EDM in his bedroom, and get a coffee with Kahlua in it and a big plate of chips and just talk. But I can't remember much about any of the houses and flats we lived in around the area. Those memories are hazy, and often feel like they didn't happen to me at all. I know where we lived, and I know they are still there, but I'm not there anymore. My relationship to those places exists only in my head. My relationships to the people who were some of the most important people in my life at that point exists broadly in theory. It would be so easy for someone to just refute anything I had to say about that period of my life, and I'd have nothing but a malformed recollection of my side of the experience to go off. The walls could have been green, but memory does not manifest in color. I'm 25, and I'm also transgender. The funny thing about being transgender is what it does to your memory. We're fed a lot of perspectives about the relationship people have to who they were pre-transition. Some say they've always been like this, they were just living as someone else. Some say they have a pretty hard line between who they are now and who they were, as if their childhood never happened to them, but rather to another person. I think I fall into that camp. Sometimes I feel like I woke up one day on the bus to work and I've just been playing with someone else's experiences to craft something of my own. And that doesn't play nice with already feeling like your entire life is now being meddled with by other people. The walls that kept me safe are now keeping other people safe. The floors that I would play on are being played on by multitudes of imaginary children who I've never met. It feels invasive, like I have a protectiveness of the ways in which I would interact with my tiny world that are now being damaged by ghosts, knowing full well they were never mine to begin with. Those walls and floors belong to someone else, someone invisible, who merely allowed us to stay there until we couldn't. I have a job in recruitment. It's not sales model driven like a lot of recruitment agencies in the world, and we work with nonprofits exclusively. I'm paid well for the work I do, and I'm having a good time learning the ropes and upskilling myself on things like proposal writing, corporate interaction, and I get to work from home. It's an email job without the crushing mundanity of having nothing to do in an office once you finish all your work by 11 a.m. However, the company is still in startup. I was the first real hire they've had, and so far it's just me and the 2 directors. And recently I've been identifying a lot of anxiety about the status of the company and whether or not I'm even going to have a job in the next 6 months, especially when work is slow to come in. I live with my mom because she's working class and never had the opportunity to own property because she had a very different upbringing than my aunts had and wound up in very different social circumstances. We have my nephew to raise because my sister is having problems of her own that forced my mom into having to foster him. And none of us have anywhere to fall back into if things go wrong. We are precariously working class. I watch a lot of YouTube videos that have the same cadence I'm trying to cultivate with this one, and often they'll be talking about some really sad experience with housing that I can empathize with and will almost always invariably end up talking about how they had to move back into their childhood bedroom as a stopgap between their old place and finding a new one. These videos make me feel weird, because on one hand, I want to empathize with these terrible experiences they're having with life right now. It sucks being housing insecure. My mom and I were housing insecure before we found this place, because her and my stepdad had just broken up, and he wanted us out of the house that he owned. We can't go back there. I can't go back there. The bedroom that I occupied since I was 16 is no longer mine. It's a spare bedroom now. I don't have a childhood bedroom. I only have bedrooms that I lived in for brief periods. They were incredibly utilitarian, a means to an end. The kid needs a bedroom, give them this one until we have to move and put them in a different one. I never had what these people have, and sometimes it makes me a bit angry and a little jealous, having to hear these diatribes about losing space being bookended with the knowledge that they still had somewhere familiar and safe to return to. It's petty that I have these thoughts. I feel petty writing this because I see all these videos about people dramatizing their experiences with life in these beautiful ways that make you want to sympathize, while I've always felt stupid talking about myself. Why would anyone want to hear about my life? I'm in a relatively good position. Nobody wants to hear the privileged scribblings about another white person's experience with divorced parents and dissociated childhood, without reconciling with the fact that I probably only feel that way because I'm projecting these insecurities about myself onto these people who have had these awful experiences but still have something that I don't have. A childhood bedroom. Something that people who have had to move around a lot only feel in the present, when they found another place to settle into until the next thing comes along. I'm sure this is the same thing people who are actively experiencing homelessness right now feel about me, simply having somewhere to go at the end of the day. Even if I have to move around a lot. And have to remind myself that it's not these people's fault. It's class. There's a childhood of mine somewhere out there existing on loop in the cracks between the metaphysical space of all the houses I've ever lived in, and I don't feel connected to any of them because I'm trans, working class, and unable to access any of those memories in any real, tangible way. I can't touch those walls or those floors ever again. I'm 25 and I don't have a high school diploma because the high school I went to was run as a money-making scam by an exploitative, vindictive person that flew under the radar of the private school infrastructure that continues to ruin the education of thousands of people in similar positions to mine, because we're taught that private means better quality, as opposed to private meaning owned by someone other than the state, who are not bound to the same rules and regulations. And I was a victim of this. I will never have the experience of going to university. I'm 25, and despite this, I've managed to carve out a slice of life for myself by pure luck. I'm 25, almost 30, and these two things compound in my brain as everything I have is built on an incredibly unstable foundation, and I will have nothing left if something goes even slightly wrong. I don't have a childhood bedroom to return to if I lose my flat, because my childhood is now intertwined with my adulthood, in that my mum, once a source of safety and comfort for me, is now someone who I live with and am as financially responsible for as she is for me, as we split expenses, and we're both financially responsible for my nephew, who's about to go to high school. And sometimes, despite how much grief I have with my government, I'm so glad for our somewhat robust social security measures, because we don't have to pay for his school fees, because my mum is his foster parent. I'm 25, almost 30, and I'm growing up. And I have no safety net. I've never had a childhood bedroom, my parents used to rent, and sometimes I'm terrified about the future. Sometimes I get upset at people who have something to fall back on. Sometimes I get angry at people whose parents pay for their tuition and housing, and complain about being broke or poor or whatever, because fuck, man. Sometimes people don't know how good they have it when they have it, and sometimes you really want to punch those people in the mouth when you tell them about the rough time you've had with figuring shit out without a high school diploma or a childhood bedroom or anything to fall back into if the shit hits the fan, and they give you this fucking diatribe about how it's important to get a high school diploma, all with this air that they very clearly feel both sorry for you and better than you in so many ways. And like, yeah, man, I would have loved to have all these things, but I don't. And it's not their fault, like, not really. We're all victims under capitalism. But sometimes it's really frustrating watching these videos about people who, at face value, aren't as much of a victim as you are, talking like they've had the worst shit happen to them, while relating those experiences to a fucking video game or whatever. Because on some level, I'm lamenting a life I could have had if things went just a little bit differently, because this is really kind of a video about my parents. On my dad's side, I had everything. At my mom's house, I had very little. And constantly oscillating between those two lifestyles as a kid gives you a very malformed sense of identity. And I constantly felt like I had to play mediator between them. At one point, almost literally, having to play these undercover mind games to make sure things didn't fall apart. And I can't, in good conscience, make a video about my experiences with class without at least mentioning that if things played out a bit differently, I could have finished high school, I could have gone to university, I could have had my tuition and housing paid for, and I could have ended up exactly like the people I get so fucking angry about sometimes, and ultimately could have ended up in the exact same position I am now, equally fucking miserable, but with two pieces of paper that signal to assholes that I'm worth the time of day. And there's a part of me that really, truly believes that if I had these things, if my life flopped in the other direction, that I'd be a happier person, a more stable person, with less problems. But I see so many of my friends with all of these things struggle every single day. And sometimes when I'm not feeling like a bratty, vindictive asshole, I think, damn, I'm so fucking glad I didn't go to university, because this was very clearly a real shitty time for so many people I hold close to me. When my mum and stepdad were still together, I occupied the same bedroom from the time I was 16 to the time I was 24. And I would give anything to not have any of the associations I have with that room. It was suffocating. I'm 25, almost 30, and fuck, sometimes when my mind is calm and I'm just existing and I can think clearly, I lament the childhood bedroom I once had and thank my lucky stars I never have to go back there, despite the precariousness of my life right now. I don't want to be homeless, but I also don't want that bedroom back. At time of writing, our living situation is uncertain. We were sold snake oil by a landlord looking to outrun some debts he had accumulated. We were lied to, and we were being threatened with having our access to the premises barred by the body corporate. Consequences that should be faced by the person we are renting from are now falling on us, and we're being forced to reevaluate and uproot our lives and our stability again, to make sure that we can give a good life to ourselves, my nephew, and our dog. I have no control over these walls and these floors, and the safety and security of my family have been put in jeopardy by an outsider who is too embroiled in the fantasy of being at the top, an untouchable force who can hold the lives of others in his hands. And it ultimately trickled down into potentially devastating emotional consequences for my family. And he will likely never see consequences for his blatant ineptitude. It's really hard to find pet-friendly places these days, especially dog-friendly places. I don't want to lose her. I've given up a lot of dogs over the years, and I'm really trying to make sure I don't have, to send her somewhere unfamiliar. Thankfully, we were stricken by some good luck. An opportunity fell into our laps that we are really hoping comes to fruition. A cheaper, bigger, rent-capped little townhouse, not too much farther from where we are now. Closer to the bus, closer to my mom's new place of work. And we're really hoping that, should things go well, we'll have a place to stay, like really stay, for at least a little while. I don't like living like this, and I don't like having my anger automatically fall on people who have nothing to do with me or my life. But it's interesting to examine the ways in which classes of people who use this power to influence our livelihoods can inadvertently direct our emotions away from them. I should be angry at him, and the system that puts people like him in the position to be able to dismantle my family. But my anger often falls on people who have safety nets. I think about people who have childhood bedrooms and have their lives paid for by their parents, and I think, you're a fucking asshole, dude. You wouldn't last 2 seconds in this situation. And sometimes it feels so good to revel in this destructive mindset, because in some way, I see them as being closer to myself. A landlord is this ephemeral force, this idea that invokes nothing cathartic for me to get angry at, because I have no power over them. But I can imagine a sort of narrative power over people who have a similar but fractionally more stable circumstance to my own. I can craft this arc for myself, that by being in this situation, by having worked from a place of almost rock bottom, that I have a moral standing over them. They have these safety nets because they live inherently less moral lives, having attained what they have nepotistically. But am I really that different to them? The only reason we have the flat we're living in now was because my mom was able to strike a deal with my stepdad, who helped us pay the deposit and meet the salary requirements. The flat we're currently looking at was previously occupied by my cousin. Is that not, at least in some capacity, nepotism? Am I wasting my time getting angry at people who just got a better deal with theirs? Is that not exactly how managers pit their employees against each other in the workplace? Lots of companies forbid coworkers from discussing salaries, and this practice often breeds vicious rumors about who's getting paid what, which prevents us from developing critical relationships with each other. Crucial unionization efforts die at this stage. We're ushered into this carnal mode of operation where everyone is an enemy except the people who actually are. We can't talk about why X is getting paid more than Y, even if they're not, because then people might start asking questions. Oh, and we can't have questions. Questions suck, because they often require answers, and you can't answer they're getting paid more just because they are, because then people might start to realize that they're all in the same boat, and the system can't function if there are enough people who all recognize the same thing, because it's designed, on purpose, to only work in the favor of a very select few, while the rest of us get fucked. This is the world I live in. I live here, in this shitty flat that I'm paying way too much for, with cracks in the pipes that leak water through the skirtings, mold on the roof, and a stove with only one working plate. And I can think about the days where I had a childhood bedroom, and I had all these wonderful privileges that I don't have anymore. And I can curse at the people who still do, and it will change none of it, because nostalgia is a set of blinders to a world that is burning behind me while I walk backwards towards warmth. There have always been shitty flats that people have always paid too much for, with shitty broken plumbing and shitty broken stoves, and I'm just one of the people that fell down from an ivory tower and had to learn that the hard way. And I think there's a part of me that hopes an experience like that will bring people who have safety nets bestowed upon them by a nest of generational wealth back to the community. It will burst their bubble, so to speak. It will make them realize what I've realized, so that I can feel some form of catharsis and have a socio-political memento that remind me that I'm not insane for feeling like this world was not built for me, and that this shit does not work at all, and has never worked. And that's a conditioned response. Capitalistic Schadenfreude. A layover from being gaslighted by a culture that tries to force a social species into these competitive arenas where we fight for the amusement of people who wouldn't look twice if I were dead in a gutter somewhere. And I should fucking stop that. I gain nothing from these feelings. They fester and boil and make me bitter because all I do is wish that I had what they have, what I used to have. It's fucking FOMO advertising on the most macro scale possible. Your neighbors will be green with envy when they see how much better your life is with basic living security. It infects my emotions and makes me incapable of seeing the little joy I do have in my life. Because there's always that little bit of joy, at least. I'm 25, that's 5 years away from turning 30, and I don't know what the fuck is going on anymore. This world is burning. I'm terrified all the time. I'm terrified that I'm going to lose my flat. I'm terrified that I'm going to lose my dog. I am terrified that my savings are not growing. I'm terrified that someone is going to hurt me in the street. I'm terrified of leaving my house for fear that I will spend money I don't have. I'm terrified that my job is going to evaporate, leaving my entire family without a safety net. I'm terrified that I'm going to get fired for forgetting to do something because of my ADHD. I'm terrified that not having a high school diploma will prevent me from finding a job as good. I'm terrified of looming food insecurity, of rising sea levels, of rising temperatures, but I'd be damned if I let nostalgia bait me into thinking I'd be better off in a room that stunted me for so long. Childhood bedrooms will not save my family, but a different way of doing things might. My experience is just a microcosm of some really bad shit in this world. There's a bigger enemy at play.
Spring is here, a suppering is here. Life is skittles and
thank you for watching whatever this was. And if you made it this far, congratulations on being able to withstand my voice for 25 minutes. There's going to be a little bit more at the end here, so just be prepared for that. You're more than welcome to click off. I don't know what this channel is going to be, and I don't know what kind of video I want to make, but I knew I wanted to make something, and I think this is the first of that something. Just something that's been on my mind, I guess, for a very, very long time, but I didn't want to make something too self-effacing, even though I'm using myself here as the sort of subject matter. I also want to make things that are about, bigger stuff, and sometimes it's easier just to use me as an example. The primary inspirations for this video were 5 stories from my life and the socialist policies that could have changed them by Sarah Zedek. She's a trans YouTuber, fantastic media analyst, big fan. And obviously the 90s neoliberal fantasia as experienced by Daria Morgendorfer, Millennial, by Innuendo Studios. Fantastic video essayist. Big fan of him as well. I am going to dip out now and let the song, whatever it is, take you home.
To experiment, my pulse will be quickening with each drop of strychnine we feed to a pigeon. It just takes a smidgen to poison a pigeon in the park.